This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 296 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Jana Milbacher about Gilded Age gardens and the Buffalo Fling. The plant profile is on wild petunia, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with a last word on when to pick bell peppers from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by returning guest, Jana Milbacher, the garden tourist. Welcome, Jana.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi. It's great to be on your podcast again.
Great to have you back. And last time you were on was way back, episode 167, September 2023. And we were talking about flinging with the garden tourist, touring the greater Philadelphia, Pennsylvania region with the Garden Fling, and we're going to talk about this year's Fling today with you.
Yes.
But first, we're going to talk about your new book that just came out, and also what's been going on with you in the last few years since the last time we had you on.
Well, it's been a busy time. In addition to writing books, I also do a lot of speaking to garden clubs and horticultural organizations. And I do garden design for residential clients here in Massachusetts. And I actually published another book in 2024, and that was The Garden Tourist's Mid-Atlantic. And that is a guide to gardens in the eastern part of New York State, so mainly around the Hudson River and the Hudson River Valley, in New Jersey, Delaware, and eastern Pennsylvania. So that book just came out in 2024. And it basically includes public and some private gardens that you can visit in those areas. So it's a garden travel guide. And I've also been very busy actually hosting garden tours, group garden tours. That's something that I'm doing more and more of every year. These are tours that sometimes they're bus tours that leave from Massachusetts. Other times they're tours that we all fly to the destination and then do a bus tour from there. And I've included the Brandywine Valley, which of course is in the Philadelphia, Delaware area. Many great gardens there. We've been to Charleston. We've been to Long Island and Vermont, along with that, the Hudson River Valley. And then I've become much more and more involved in doing international tours. So I've done several tours to Costa Rica, to the Italy Lake region, Chelsea Flower Show in the Cotswolds, that was last year, and Netherlands and Belgium during tulip season, and then Central Europe this year. So a lot of great things have been happening since I last talked to you.
Wow. So you've been super busy and doing a lot of garden traveling. So your brand new book is out this summer, Gardens of the Gilded Age, Lavish Landscapes from America's Golden Era.
That's right.
That sounds like a lot. And I have the book in front of me here, and I was just going to kind of deconstruct that title. So first, I'm a huge fan of the Gilded Age series on HBO, as I'm sure many listeners are as well. So I'm always having an eagle eye out for the gardens, but they don't show too much. They need to show a lot more, Jana. That's my opinion.
Sadly, there are not too many filming scenes in gardens in the show itself.
No, very disappointing. I think you should get on their case.
Yeah. And actually, what I found was that there really weren't any up-to-date books about gardens of the Gilded Age. That really was not a topic that other authors had explored. I did find some books that dated back to, I believe, like the 1990s, 1980s, around there. And my interest in this period was sparked really when I first was writing the garden travel guides, because some of them are from that period. And as I was writing the travel guides, I really try to include something about the history of the garden, as well as something about the founders of the gardens, because I really feel that that gives you a greater appreciation when you visit the garden. And so, I had explored quite a few of these gardens, and so I really became very interested in the era. So that, along with the HBO series and other books that I started to read about the Gilded Age, really piqued my interest. And so I wrote this. So I started working on this book, and I decided the book really talks about all the different influences on gardens in the Gilded Age. There was a lot happening in America and in the world at that time, and that's what kind of dictated or influenced the design of these gardens. So the book goes into that, and then I also wanted people to be able to visit all of the gardens that I profile in the book. So I selected 30 gardens on the East Coast from Vermont down to Florida that are open, that have been restored, and that are open to the public so that the public can visit them. Because I feel that, there is that interest in these gardens. I didn't want to focus on ones that didn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. So that's been sort of the focus of the book. It's also very pictorial. Lots of large photos of the gardens through various seasons. So it really is. It's an interesting time period for those of you that aren't that familiar with what the Gilded Age really encompasses. Mark Twain kind of came up with that original title for that period, and it's basically from about 1870 to the early 1900s. And in my book, it encompasses what is known to garden historians as the country place era, which goes into the 1920s, because this is still when a lot of these industrialists were building these grand homes and grand gardens. So these were very well-known names to all of us, people like the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, and the DuPonts. They, were very wealthy, and typically they had ornate mansions in the city. A lot of them had mansions in New York, but also in other industrial capitals at that time. And then because railroads started spreading all across the U.S., they could very easily build additional country homes in places like Newport, in places like the Berkshires, like North Carolina. They could build winter homes in Florida. And so this really, because of the railroads, this really led to a building boom among the Gilded Age elite. And so this is when these incredible mansions and their accompanying gardens were established.
And I love looking through the book at these beautiful photos. I think I've been to maybe 50% of the gardens that you have in here. Of course, those of us in the Mid-Atlantic are very familiar with Longwood Gardens.
Yes.
Just to start with there, mentioning a DuPont estate, but you also have the Nemours estate, which is on the Wilmington, Delaware side of the DuPonts. And then Marion Coffin Gardens at Gibraltar is also in Wilmington, Delaware. Maymont South in Richmond would be familiar with a lot of listeners. If you ever go to Richmond, definitely visit Maymont. But also up in Yonkers, New York, we have Wave Hill and Untermeyer Gardens, both not to be missed.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really try to stress in the book is how all of these different elements, including the developments in travel, like the railroads that I mentioned, but also, of course, in the grand ocean liners that were built at that time, they allowed all of these Gilded Age elites to travel to Europe. And so many of them actually went to Europe on a yearly basis. They toured the European palaces and villas. They purchased their trousseaux, and they also brought back a lot of antiques and paintings. And it was really these visits abroad that sparked their interest in creating gardens and grand mansions like they had seen abroad. They saw themselves, these industrialists, saw themselves really as American nobility. And so they wanted to build homes and gardens that would actually surpass what they had seen in Europe. And they were very influenced by the gardens that they saw in England, in France, and in Italy. So those three countries really had a big influence on the design of these Gilded Age estates. And I think that, you can see that in some of the gardens very clearly in the book. For instance, when you look at Nemours, which is in Wilmington, that is a French style garden. It has that French formality. It has beautiful long allées. It has a central long walk that's a third of a mile long. It has French parterres around the mansion, beautiful parterre gardens, gorgeous statuary, and big reflecting pools, which are very popular. And the layout is very geometric and focuses on those straight lines and geometric shapes. And those are some of the hallmarks of the French garden design. So that garden was actually based on the design of the gardens around the Petit Trianon at Versailles. So French gardens had a major influence on Gilded Age gardens. Italian gardens also had a really big impact on Gilded Age gardens. And Italian gardens are typically, they're built on slopes because Italian villas and palaces are usually at the top of a mountain or rise. And so these are gardens that are terraced, that are in different levels. The terraces divide them into separate garden rooms. They have a lot of statuary. They have water features, cascades. Those are kind of like a formal form of waterfall. Those are very popular. Fountains are very popular. A lot of classical statuary of Greek and Roman gods are typically in these gardens, and they're primarily green gardens. So flowers are mainly used as accents, whereas in French gardens you have a lot of the floral parterres, but in Italian gardens the flowers are mainly used in urns and other containers as accents. So you see a lot of Italian garden influence in many of the gardens. One of my favorite gardens here in New England from the Gilded Age period is the Mount. Have you ever been there, Kathy?
I have not been there.
Yes. So this was Edith Wharton's summer home. And of course, she was the famous author. And she and her husband, she came from one of those very wealthy families during the Gilded Age. She was born Edith Jones, and the term keeping up with the Joneses actually began with her family. So they were very wealthy. But they had actually a Gilded Age, summer cottage in Newport, but they also decided to build a home in Western Massachusetts in Lenox, which is one of the towns in the Berkshires. And at that time, it was actually nicknamed the Inland Newport. And there were quite a few people that came from New York City and had their homes there for summer and fall. And so she actually designed her garden herself, and half of it is a French flower garden, very formal in its design and open and sunny and filled with many flowers. And the other half is a sunken Italian garden. And that is a garden that's really just designed in green and white. So it only has white blooming flowers. It's a shady garden. It's enclosed by stone. As I said, it's sunken below grade. You walk downstairs to get to it. So you can really get it's a great example of the differences in those two styles of garden design, the French and the Italian. And then she has, there's a beautiful allée. It's a pleached lime allée. That means it's lined with linden trees that have been pleached, so they look almost like an elevated hedge, and that connects the two gardens. So that's a wonderful place to visit if you're in New England.
And I was noting also Swan House in Atlanta.
Yes.
Is one of my favorites. And if anybody's watched The Hunger Games, that's President Snow's mansion. Very recognizable if you've ever seen the movie series, and it's been used in other movies and TV as well. But it's very accessible, very open to the public. It's part of the Atlanta History Center.
Right.
And so it doesn't preserve the gardens as much, but the emphasis, of course, is on the house there.
Yeah. Well, there are gardens there, and they're in that Italian style. So, they have a very prominent cascade in the back of the house. That's a real Italian feature. And then they have the smaller parterre gardens. And again, these are primarily green gardens. They're really not flower gardens because the Italian garden style was really primarily that of a green garden. So that's another wonderful place to visit. Now, during the Gilded Age, this was the time also when Japan opened to the West after 200 years. And so Americans just became fascinated with Japanese garden design and also with Japanese plants. So this is when a lot of plants like Japanese maples, rhododendrons, and azaleas, as well as plants like hostas that we all have in our gardens today, this is when they became available. And so some of the Gilded Age gardens also had a Japanese garden. And of course, Maymont is one example of that. They have a lovely Japanese garden. They also have a cascade in the back of the house. And the flower garden that they have there is kind of in that parterre garden style, the Italian garden. So Japan, that was another major influence on gardening of that period. And the late 1800s were also a great time in general for plant hunting. This is when plant hunters traveled all over the globe and they brought back a lot of exotic plants. And of course, these Gilded Age elites became big collectors. For many of them, collecting plants kind of replaced or augmented collecting antiques from Europe or collecting paintings. So the plant collections became something for them, to first of all to enjoy personally, but to also to show off to their friends. And so many of them also became plant collectors at this time. And in order to keep many of these plants alive, they had to, of course, build conservatories because not all of many were from tropical regions of the world.
Yeah, lots of orchid collections, especially.
Yes, lots of orchid collections, exactly. So this is when you have a lot of the conservatories that are being built. So at places like Longwood Gardens or places like Biltmore, there is a beautiful conservatory there as well. So conservatories really became a big part of the landscape of these gardens. There are lots of different elements or happenings that really influenced gardens at this time. Another one was that a lot of horticultural societies were founded in the late 1800s. It was really a very exciting time to be a gardener in America. This is when you've got the societies being formed. You also have garden clubs being formed in the late 1800s. And you have some of our renowned botanic gardens are established then, like the New York Botanical Garden, for instance. And of course, Longwood Gardens was established, the Arnold Arboretum here in Boston. So it was really a wonderful time to be a gardener in America. Lots of new plants, seed houses are being established, and nurseries are being established. So it was a very exciting time overall.
I think my favorite part of your book, Jana, is the talking about the professional gardeners themselves.
Yes.
And the people who put together those gardens for the Gilded Age elite.
Yes.
And I love the poaching of the talent.
Yes.
That they were prized employees and very highly regarded.
Yeah.
And so your gardener was, up there with your butler, I would say.
Right. The head gardener. Yeah, that was really a very important position in these estates. And as you said, many of them came from Europe because they had much more experience in working on large gardens with a variety of plants. And they had to have they typically had more than 20 years of experience. Because they oversaw a team of gardeners, they also usually had a cottage that they lived in right on the property itself. They also were the ones, of course, that communicated with the landscape architects as well as with the owners. So they typically dressed in, three-piece suits. Because they were the ones that were overseeing in management level, and they had to have a lot of skills in all different aspects of landscape design and cultivation of plants. And again, they didn't have the internet. They didn't even have necessarily a lot of books at that time. A lot of the plants that they were trying to grow as well as propagate, were very new to Americans. And so I think it was a really challenging position, and they just had to have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience.
Yeah, and I think the esteem they were held in is wonderful.
Yes.
I wish we had that, higher professional class of horticulturalism today. And, a lot of them were probably giving talks to those local horticultural societies, or they were
That's
the founding
right.
members of those horticultural
Exactly.
societies.
Yes.
So those are some names that you will probably recognize, if you have an older garden club or horticultural society. Certainly like our local Tacoma Horticultural Society has roots back to that age as well.
Yes, yeah. The Newport head gardeners started a society there, and that's where they were able to share information with each other, and they held meetings, they had plant competitions, etc. So yeah, it was it's kind of like the downstairs of these mansions. It's a whole nother kind of society of people with their own hierarchy and challenges.
So listeners, definitely get Jana's book to learn more and to look at those beautiful photos. I'll have a link to her book in the podcast show notes, but it's available everywhere you buy books, correct, Jana?
Yes, that's right. And also on my website, which is enchantedgardensdesign.com.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Let's talk about some other garden touring that we did recently.
Yes.
Meaning that both of us were attendees of the recent Garden Fling in Buffalo, New York. That was earlier in July, I think the week after Independence Day weekend, the 10th, 11th, 12th, correct?
Yes.
Most of us arrived Thursday afternoon, the 9th, to get settled. And that evening, we had a reception at the Erie Basin Marina Trial Garden, and Sully's was our gathering place for a reception there. And you drove in, correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And I was able to visit a couple of Gilded Age estates that I had never been to on the way. One was the George Eastman House and Museum, and the other was Sonnenberg Gardens. So it was a great opportunity for me to see those. They're in Rochester, so they were on the way for me to get to Buffalo.
Nice. I flew.
Yeah,
right. But easy drive to Buffalo for most of the upper East Coast and, Pittsburgh, everywhere else, the Midwest, very easy to get to. And we should tell listeners a little bit about Buffalo's garden scene and why the Fling was there this year and about the Fling itself. So Buffalo, New York, has developed over the last 20 years, thanks to, I think, founder Sally Cunningham, a garden walk that takes place towards the end of July every year, like usually third or fourth week, and it has surrounding events before and after that, where they open up hundreds of private gardens throughout Buffalo for free, everybody.
Yes,
listen to that. And then you can make a little jet over to Niagara Falls while you're at it too, and then also visit some of the public gardens in the area. But many, many different types of private gardens, from urban tiny cottage district, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to larger gardens in the outer suburbs.
Yeah.
And Buffalo is, I think, zone 5-6, depending on where you are.
I believe that's what everyone was telling me.
Mm-hmm. And sits on Lake Erie. So it's getting, I'm going to say blasted. I'm going to use the word blasted by the winter ice and storms. It's a huge lake effect.
Yes.
So a lot of the gardens that we visited and people I talked to, Jana, they are snowbirds. They might be spending the nice months, right? The growing months in Buffalo. And then they might spend the rest of the year somewhere else, or they're just not gardening during those rest of those winter months. You might have a little, indoor garden, or a small greenhouse, but most of your gardening is being intensely done in the summer.
Exactly.
And so that kind of dictated some of the gardens and styles that we saw, because everybody, I think, on the Fling was talking about tons of annuals, tons of containers. And I'm like, well, yeah, when you have a shortened garden season compared to the rest of the Mid-Atlantic, that's what you're going to have.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the Buffalo Garden Walk had been on my bucket list for many years, ever since I first learned about it. I think really through Jim Charlier, through kind of social media from him, and so it had been on my. But one of the things that I didn't really realize until I went to this event was that it was not just that weekend, the one weekend in July, but a garden festival or celebration that lasts for the entire month of July.
Yes.
And even starts before. They also have this garden art sale in June that is really connected to this event. And I've always wanted to go. Someday I'll make it to that, but because it is much earlier than the July celebration. But it has grown, I think, from this one weekend to encompass the entire month, where you have every weekend you have these garden walks, and these are, I guess, primarily through the suburbs. So this is a chance to see some really wonderful suburban gardens, and they have a brochure that they print that lists the opening times and locations of these gardens, kind of like something that England has, for instance, and has had for about 100 years, where they list, they have an open garden kind of summer-long celebration, and you get a book that's a guide, and that tells you which gardens are open and when. So Buffalo has adopted this as well, which is just wonderful because it makes so many additional gardens available to you. And if you can't make it for the one big weekend, perhaps you can make it to some of these other weekend garden tours.
Yeah.
So I was very impressed with that, just how much the event has grown and just how many people are participating.
Yeah, I had been 9 years ago with the Garden Writers of America at that time, now GardenCom, had our annual meeting based around the garden walk in Buffalo. So I got to see a lot of gardens then, but it has definitely grown in almost the decade in between. And the main website for those interested in learning more is gardens, plural, buffaloniagara.com. And then everywhere you go in Buffalo, there's a garden walk booklet or pamphlet out. You can pick one up everywhere, and easy to find online and to Google and see. There's also some coordinated tours. We have Teresa Watkins, a co-friend of ours from GardenCom, has a Buffalo Garden Walk tour that she coordinates, and there's other people who are coordinating tours coming in from elsewhere around the Garden Walk. So it's really boosting tourism in the city of Buffalo as well.
Yes, definitely.
And so we were privileged to be able to see some also public gardens along with those private gardens. Right. So maybe let's touch on some of the public spaces that people could go to anytime. So one of them was Murray's Hosta Farm.
Oh, yes.
And garden was lunch on our first full day of Friday.
Yes.
It's hostas, hostas, and hostas.
And, and it's wonderful because you can buy hostas there. But what I love, of course, were the display gardens, because hostas are the type of plant that really changes quite a bit from when you typically will buy it in a pot to when it is mature. A lot of the intricate details of different cultivars really don't come out until it is mature size. So, 2 to 3 years later. And so I think going to a nursery that has display gardens is really very important when you're purchasing hostas, because that's when you really get to see what it will look like in its mature state, and also its size, because some of them do get very, very large.
Yeah, and I will say that we saw some hostas on the Friday morning tours in the south side towns.
Yes.
The south towns of Buffalo, and I immediately noted one, ran when we got to Murray's, straight to the owner, and I said, "Do you have this hosta?" Sold. I bought it. I was I don't buy many, plants when I go on garden tours, but I had to have that hosta.
Yes.
And so I told her, you better stock up on this one because everybody on that garden tour saw that hosta and wants it. And I will say that compared to the Mid-Atlantic area, Buffalo can grow hostas.
Yes.
Like we can grow hostas. We have nice hostas, in the greater DC, Mid-Atlantic area.
Right.
But they are on steroids. And I think they just get bigger and more incredible every year. Of course, they do, listeners, don't think they don't have deer pressure. They have deer pressure there. So lots of the gardens we saw have deer fencing or deer precautions. Our first stop on the Friday morning Buffalo Southtowns tour was a couple called John and Carol Hajnos. And they're hosta daylily collectors, beautiful lived-in garden. And Yana, when I stepped off the bus and I saw these little stakes with sponges on them in the garden, I asked John, the homeowner, what are these, or is this for deer prevention? And he said, yes. So they are real sponges, like sea sponges. He said, you can't use artificial sponges. It has to be a real sponge and soaked in deer repellent. And then held up on the same stakes you would use to put like a little plant tag on.
Right.
So like those plant tag stakes. So it's held up about, 18 inches or so right in the nose zone of the deer. So he had those out front where you couldn't have deer fencing on the front side of the home. Right. So I said, great tip. Immediately, first garden, love it.
Yeah. Another tip that I have, a friend of mine does this. A fertilizer called Milorganite is available for sale, throughout the country. And it's a granular fertilizer. And, putting it down in your garden, it does have an unpleasant smell. For humans, it goes away pretty quickly. But for the deer, I guess it stays. And so that is a great way to do it. And my friend, actually, she takes she cuts off the bottoms of old pantyhose, or let's say those nylon knee highs. She fills them with this Milorganite, and then she will actually tie them to the branches of some of her shrubs, and they basically become invisible in the garden. But again, they're bringing that smell up higher to nose level and protecting things like hollies and rhododendrons in her garden. So that's another good tip of how you can protect your garden without deer fencing.
Yeah, great tip. In the DC area, DC Water has a similar product called Bloom. And that is also, a byproduct of our fertilizer, human fertilizer, we'll call it.
Right.
It is pretty scent free. I don't really detect a scent. I have a pretty sensitive nose, but I sprinkle it around my roses and other things. But you have the added benefit, it's used as a soil conditioner, but added benefit of being a critter deterrent. So because they don't love the smell of humans that much. And anything in John and Carol's garden that caught your eye besides the deer prevention and the beautiful hostas?
Well, they also had a fabulous collection of hydrangeas throughout the garden. And lots of other kind of more unusual trees and shrubs. So it was really a collector's garden, and they had taken basically 1 acre and planted the entire garden. There was virtually no grass in the backyard, and lots of winding little paths throughout. So you really, you felt that the garden was much bigger because it was just so densely planted and just divided by these passageways. So it was really, you could easily get lost in that garden that was only 1 acre in size.
Yeah, and I would say 40 years of intensely garden property, which is great to see.
Yeah.
And our next stop that morning was Wendy and Jeff Lionmark, and also in Hamburg, and they called it a fully operational suburban farm.
Yes.
And from that title, I was expecting, a working farm.
Right.
And we got there, and I will say that it was the most immaculate, weed-free, gorgeous, productive vegetable garden I have ever been to, Yana.
Same here. The whole productive part of the garden was amazing, but even just the plantings in the front of the house were so beautifully composed. Wonderful plant combinations, textures, colors put together. And then you step into the back, And the vegetable garden is right there, right off the deck, which again is really unusual. People tend to tuck it way back in the back of their lot, but this was right there, and it was such a beautiful space. I have never seen. First of all the vegetables were themselves were just beautiful. They were perfection. There was no hole in a leaf, or they were just absolutely perfect. Do you remember the cabbages that we saw?
Oh yes, yeah.
The beds, there were raised beds that were, beautifully just designed with the plantings so that you would have variations in leaf color and, a real design to them.
Mm-hmm.
And beautiful and nice decorative elements throughout as well. They had a lot of structures like garden sheds and greenhouses very close that kind of subdivided their backyard. And again, beautiful window boxes, beautiful containers.
And all made or designed by the homeowner,
Yes.
gardener, Jeff. And
Yes.
a lot of steel and copper use I thought was beautiful.
Yes.
Like the fencing that's around the vegetable garden,
Yes.
painted black.
Right.
Very, very dramatic and beautiful. Lots of great photos. And speaking of photos, if you go to the Instagram account for the Garden Fling, so it's at the Garden Fling, you'll see a lot of people's photos from this fling in Buffalo that have been posted in the last few weeks, and then of course previous flings. But I'll also post a big album of my Buffalo Fling photos to Washington Gardener Magazine's Facebook page. So you can kind of flip through those and see what Yana and I are talking about, because describing it as one thing, but being there or seeing the photos is something totally different.
Yeah.
And then our next stop on Friday morning, I can't believe we're just on Friday on it.
I know.
Beth and Nick Buscaglio, they named their garden Double the View. They are sitting right on Lakeshore Road, looking out over Lake Erie across to Canada. And kind of to the right would be Niagara Falls and Buffalo. You could see them in the distance. Beautiful, beautiful garden.
And the location was just gorgeous. Yeah, just gorgeous. And this was a very colorful garden and lots of nice whimsical details.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they had a giant buffalo. We saw many buffaloes in these gardens. I think almost every garden had a buffalo, but theirs was probably the biggest and painted like a flag. So
yep. It was a huge, I would say close to life size.
Yes.
Buffalo. Yeah. Most of the buffaloes we saw in people's gardens were usually these copper cutouts.
Right.
And like a metal cutout, maybe 1 foot by 2 feet wide. And one garden I saw what I would call a herd of these.
Yes.
But usually it was just 1 or 2 placed around, and just to remind you, you're still in Buffalo.
Right. But lots of fun containers in this garden. It was a very colorful garden, lots of wonderful details. They also had some really interesting stones that they had found that were geologic, formations that were left by, I guess, the receding icebergs. And those were really interesting in the garden as well. They were very circular.
It was kind of like a round mound, kind of swirly. It's hard to describe.
Yeah.
Maybe like a lump of potatoes if it was in stone form. And then there were holes bored in some of them that they put pots in.
Right. Mm-hmm. So lots of creative details in this garden. Lots of repurposing of everyday objects and making them into containers for the garden, which was a lot of fun.
I liked her use of broken plates kind of stacked around.
Yes.
In the garden was really inventive too.
Yes.
So we did lunch at Murray's, did a little shopping, of course, at the Hosta Farm. And then that afternoon was spent in the Allentown neighborhood of Buffalo for a self-guided walking tour. I think, 7 properties. And that included one of our organizers of the fling, Elizabeth Licata, and her husband, Alan Bigelow. That garden was very urban, right?
Yeah.
The Allentown area, I would describe it as, I think it was Victorian era. Most of the homes were larger Victorians on very narrow city lots.
Yes, talking about a lot of the individual city gardens in Buffalo. But, I think the the city gardens really showed us that you can make use of every inch on your property to build a garden, so that and any garden, no matter how small, can be filled with wonderful elements. I mean, I'm always surprised at how jam-packed these gardens are with trees. And then they use a lot of things, a lot of plants that take up little space in the ground, like vines. A lot of them had clematis and other vines because, of course, they grow vertically, and all you need is some sort of a support. But they just don't take up a lot of space in the ground. So that was something that we saw a lot of.
Yeah, and a lot of container use also
because
of that.
Use.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I did do a lot of quizzing about how you're overwintering a lot of these. Of course, bringing them in as house plants or pulling them into a garage. Like they would have several figs in containers, those weren't being overwintered outside.
Right. Yeah. And some of the gardens, some of them were, the containers were actually on a vertical plane. So they were mounted onto a fence or other vertical structure. So again, making use of every inch of space. And of course, many of the containers were very whimsical. You saw a lot of heads, cement heads. and then they were also cement heads that were also dressed up or accessorized, with sunglasses, jewelry. Everything was taken, one step further, really.
And you can tell somebody visited somebody else's garden on the tours, and some of these really got picked up as local trends.
Yes, exactly. One of my favorite gardens was the one that was, that coleus was the dominant plant there. And this garden there were 150 containers. So most of the garden was actually built on top of an existing driveway. And you would never guess that you were basically on a driveway, because these containers some of them were large, others were, stacked on some sort of plinths, and you really felt enveloped by the plants. It was very colorful because of the use of coleus, which has, all different colored leaves. And then there were wonderful little seating areas made throughout and just kind of encircled by these containers. It was just a fabulous garden.
Yeah, I agree.
So it was a place where you'd want to spend the entire day.
I think coleus, even more than hosta, was the plant of the fling this year. There was just
coleus,
so much coleus and so many different ones and so much layering that you didn't even notice that, it's not a flower. It's almost as attractive or more, and a lot of caladium use as well.
Caladiums and daylilies. We saw a lot of daylilies throughout.
For sure. A lot of great daylilies.
Clematis also. I was thinking about, which plants were being used in these gardens, and which plants, I didn't see. So for instance, I didn't see very many roses typically in these gardens. But lots of daylilies, lots of hydrangeas, a lot of plants that really are peaking in July and into August. So the emphasis really there is on kind of midsummer gardens as opposed to early summer or late spring.
Yeah, a sprinkling of roses, but I think those would be earlier or later.
Right.
And as you said, they're maximizing it for the tour time too. And what's full in look. And that evening we had a reception and dinner at the 20th Century Club, an Italian villa-style structure built in 1895. So there's your Gilded Age right there, Yana.
Yes, exactly. Well, it was a Gilded Age, but not a mansion. It was made very clear to me that it had never been a mansion. It had always been built as a women's club. So, and it has a very long history and still used as a women's club today. And they have a committee that maintains the beautiful gardens there. And they were just lovely, kind of terraced gardens coming down to a big patio.
Yeah, just really beautiful setting. You could tell lots of weddings are hosted there and other life events. Very special place to have in downtown Buffalo. So our next day, Saturday, we went to the north town, so north side of Buffalo, to visit a bunch of gardens. And one was Jay Jing Hugh's garden.
Yes.
Everybody loves Jay. He was a great host to us. He described it as a semi-formal garden. And I don't even know if I would call it that. I would call it a plant lover's garden.
Yes, I agree. Of course, what struck me there was the use of the mandevilla, the pink mandevilla. He probably had about 40 containers of mandevilla, lining up, kind of creating almost a little alley as you were coming into his garden. And it was a very exuberant, happy garden. Just a feeling of happiness.
Yes,
Of,
very welcoming.
Very, very.
Yeah, and very colorful, and somebody who loves to collect plants, and the scent was beautiful. I think it was the mandevilla that I was smelling that morning, and we were lucky we were there, pretty early in the morning to get that.
Yes. Yeah. No, that was just a wonderful place, on a quiet little private road. And, again, kind of using a wide driveway as a patio space. With lots of potted plants there and seating areas. So again, although this garden was not a tiny garden like you had seen in the city, it really was made for entertaining. Lots of great places to sit and enjoy the plantings. So,
and his signature red benches everywhere.
Yes, that's right. The red benches.
Yeah,
exactly.
And our first stop that morning was Shirley Verico in Williamsville, and she had a great collection of dahlias, and I did talk to her extensively because she was in a little bit of outer suburb about deer pressure, and she confessed that they'd taken down a lot of the deer netting and stuff from around the dahlias for our tour, because I said, these can't just be sitting out here, able to be nibbled on. But that was good to know that, they're protected the rest of the time, but not for our group. Then we went to Craig and Gary's garden, which is a stone English cottage style home. And I can't tell you, Anna, how blown away I was, not just by their incredible garden, but by this house that they have maintained and reclaimed for their own.
Yeah, that was really one of my favorite stops on the tour. Of course, I love old houses too. And the house itself really created such a beautiful focal point for the garden. And again, beautifully restored and a lovely design. One of the things that I loved was how they used a dark red caladium for a little privacy screen in one of their windows, if you remember that.
Yes.
They also had a gorgeous stone veranda on one side of the house that was just encircled with beautiful potted plants, shade lovers. So there were ferns and caladiums and other plants, other shade lovers in pots, and just created a beautiful outdoor seating area and a lovely little potting shed in the back that they had designed, I believe, and built to complement their house.
Like, is an echo of the house with similar thatched roof, just beautiful. I could have moved into that, little garden shed cottage, that a lot of us were saying the same, that, when can we just, put our pillow in there?
Exactly.
And move in. And then we went on to Beth and Brian Kreutzler's Dragon's Den, appropriately named, because they have a large dragon waiting for you in the garden and some other complimentary little dragons. But what struck me most about their garden was extensive use of water gardening. And I was in heaven.
Right. They had the pond with a giant koi, and waterfalls. And I really thought that this was a garden that was designed for entertaining.
For sure.
Because, they had so many seating areas. They had that beautiful cabana-style pergola where you could sit. It was an outdoor living room, is what it was, or family
Very much.
room.
And overlooking all the water and wrapping around a corner in a suburban neighborhood. So very inviting. Very inviting.
Right. And one of the things that I remarked was it looked like they were really inviting the neighborhood in. Being on a corner, oftentimes you want to just, fence yourselves in so you have privacy, but this was sort of the opposite. They wanted to invite their neighbors in and, drop in and have a drink with us. That kind of garden. So
it was really nice. And lunch that day was at Silo City, which is exactly what it sounds like. The old grain silos, the surrounding landscape is being reclaimed, and it was just infill. It wasn't even actual dirt or soil at any point. So they're planting it with some native plants, some plants that will just, take hold and break up some of that. And really, really interesting site. Industrial, cool.
Industrial site reclamation project, really, and very, very interesting.
Yep.
Because of course this is something that faces many cities, and I think they're a real role model of what can be done. The fact that they even established their own native plant nursery on the property so that they could propagate and grow their own native plants that they can then incorporate into the landscape.
Yeah, it was really great. The experimentation is wonderful, and there's events there like watching the World Cup games and other things take place there. So Silo City is a great addition to the Buffalo landscape.
Yes.
And then that afternoon, we did a self-guided walking tour of the Elmwood neighborhood.
Yes, yes.
And so lots of different types of urban gardens than we had seen the afternoon before, which was kind of that Victorian neighborhood. That one's a little bit older. This one's slightly newer, but, still of, I would say, at least 80 to 100-year-old, a lot of the homes.
Yes, yes.
And a lot of shade gardens that afternoon. Yes. I noticed a lot of tree coverage.
Right. Mature trees, yes. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is typically a challenge of city gardens that, many of them do have to contend with shade. And luckily, there are many wonderful plants that you can incorporate. Hakone grass comes to mind because that has a beautiful gold color, along with things like hostas. And, you're looking for texture. You're looking for leaf color with the shade gardens. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the use of water features. When we went to Jim Charlier's garden, I believe he has about 11 different water features. Most of them he had designed himself. Mm-hmm. And that just adds so much interest, so much beautiful sound to the garden.
Yeah, and we can't forget that Jim Charlier was one of the co-hosts of the Fling, and co-organizers. And he has a Harry Potter garden.
Exactly.
Garden shed that he has written about. He has books on Harry Potter gardening and Buffalo style gardens. So check out his books as well for fabulous photos.
That's the Buffalo style gardens book is a great resource. Whimsical aspects of these gardens. So he did that book with Sally Cunningham.
Yes. And we ended that day at the garden of Gordon and Brian, Bird Avenue Gardens. And that was chock full of plants and fun.
Another
and a
wonderful
tiki
garden.
bar.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Can't forget the tiki bar.
Lots of beautiful dahlias there as well.
Oh, yes.
But they didn't have to worry about deer in that garden.
No, and a great collection of plants and very close, like one block or not even block, one house over from a main street.
Right.
So lots and lots of pedestrian traffic coming by, checking out their garden, as you can imagine.
Yes, yes.
And then our last morning, on Sunday, we did east of Buffalo, starting with the Draves Arboretum, a fairly new arboretum, but an incredible tree collection. And I loved seeing some of the new introductions that he showed us from Draves.
Yes, yes. And for me, to see another public garden now that's been funded by the community, that is just such a wonderful thing. I was talking earlier today with someone who was going to visit the Coastal Maine Botanic Garden up in Booth Bay in Maine, and the same kind of idea, with local community members that banded together and they wanted to have a botanic garden in their state. And so they're the ones who started it. And so, Draves Arboretum, again, it was kind of a community effort to start this project, and it's come such a long way in a short time. So it was wonderful to visit.
Yeah. And then we saw two private gardens, the garden of Brenda Fox and Joseph Bove. Both of them I would describe as large scale suburban gardens. So they had the space to spread out and do like mini meadows. I love in Joseph's that he had a Fibonacci spiral of shrubs. I was like, who can have the space for that? But I loved it.
Out of boxwood, right?
Yes. And
I also loved, he just had these kind of free-standing long hedges of Annabelle hydrangea.
Oh, yeah.
And they looked fabulous.
They did. They were looking so beautifully healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then lunch was at Frank Lloyd Wright's Martin House.
Yes.
I'd been there before on our visit 9 years ago. We did just the gardens this time, and It was so different, Yana. Like 9 years ago, they had just completed some of the planting plans and bringing back and showing us what was going to be.
Oh,
So
to
come back and see it in full fruition. The whole flower border is beautiful.
Yes, it was. That was a stunning garden. I think really complemented the design of the home itself. I'd love to come back another time when they have that very long double peony border.
Yes.
In part of the garden. I would just love to see that in bloom. But of course, they had lots of other great plants, lots of daylilies that were blooming at this time. It was a modern design that really complemented the style of the home.
And I think, Frank Lloyd Wright homes that you normally see are usually deep woods, right?
Yes.
And thinking of falling water and dark unusual shade. This was way sun, almost full sun.
Yeah, there was
on
one,
a corner.
One big shade tree.
Yeah. One big, beautiful copper beech. But other than that, is unusual for me to see a Frank Lloyd Wright home in that setting. So I loved it.
Yes.
And very prairie open.
Right.
And I think I was talking to one, is it Buffalonian? I think that's what they call themselves, about how Midwest the entire thing felt. The city, the gardens we saw felt very Midwest and less East Coast. And they said, well, Buffalo is the entryway to the Midwest. That's what it's known for. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then the trains and the Erie Canal, duh.
Right.
I was like, oh, that is the key when the Erie Canal opened and why there was a Millionaire's Row there. And the city was built up, in the early 20th century and attracted so much industry and Bethlehem Steel and all of that.
Right.
Because of that entryway and the trains, besides the canal, out to the Midwest and then on to the West.
Yeah.
And then for our final Sunday afternoon, Piece de Resistance, the Cottage District, which is what most people associate Buffalo style gardens with, which are these, I think I'm going to say 4 to 6 blocks, short blocks of cottage English style neighborhood that was established by one who had, and then I think everybody added on to it. Like she had 6 to 10 built, and then everybody was like, ooh, we want the same thing on this block. So they're very small homes, great for 1 or 2 people.
Right.
Now great for retirees, but I was glad to see that all different types of families are living in them now.
Yes. And that's where we saw that lovely driveway garden with the pots that was in that neighborhood, and many others that were just charming, very densely planted gardens. So lots of great ideas for those people that have small gardens or that live in condos and just have a small area. I think it's really worth it to visit the gardens in Buffalo and to just get some wonderful ideas.
Yeah, and you could walk through the cottage district and see the colorful painting of the cottages.
Yes.
And their front
and
gardens.
Their fences.
And fences and, the front of them at any time. You don't have to wait for a garden walk time. But obviously you get access to those beautiful back gardens, those little hidden secret gardens during the tours. And I think the highlight for me, Yana, of the cottage district was Joe Lindelow's kind of he shed in the back that he built out of an old garage.
Yes.
And he had lined it with this beautiful wood. And there's a wood burning stove in there.
That was an amazing space. Mm-hmm. It was open on both that, 2 ends, right? So you could get a breeze right through there too. Yeah, that was just lovely.
Yeah, that he shed was incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other highlights from Buffalo or the Fling that you want to share, Yana?
Well, like I said, I think the Buffalo gardens, especially the city gardens, have definitely their own style. And I think it's a wonderful place to visit, to get ideas and just to see how people garden in a different part of the country as well. So I would definitely, I'm hoping to to do a group tour there sometime in the near future and to share this area with other gardeners. They would be just delighted.
And how can listeners contact you to find more about your books and your tours and talks, Yana?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at The Garden Tourist. You can find me on Facebook just by looking up my name, Yana Milbacher. And my website is enchantedgardens.com. flingingdesign.com. And that's a place where I do have a blog on the site. Lots of information. I've been blogging for about 15 years. And so you can find out lots about gardens to visit and different plants to grow. And that's also where you can learn about my books and purchase them as well. And you can also find out about my tours. And I've got a whole lineup of tours coming up for next year, and we'll have the information on those soon. So that's how people can get in touch.
Great. Thank you so much, Jana. It was great touring the Fling with you.
Thank you, Kathy. It was great to reminisce about the Buffalo Garden Tour. It was a really special experience.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Wild Petunia. Plant profile. Wild Petunia, Ruellia humilis, is a trailing perennial plant with delicate pale purple flowers lasting only about a day, but are constantly replenished with new blooms. It's also known as fringed wild petunia, prairie petunia, and hairy wild petunia. Wild petunia is not related to the cultivated annual petunias most gardeners are familiar with, though the flowers do have a somewhat similar appearance. It's actually a member of the acanthus family and is native to the eastern half of the United States. It's hardy to USDA zones 4 to 8 and blooms from summer to fall. It's easy to grow. It prefers full sun to filtered shade. It grows best in dry, well-drained, and rocky soils, though it also thrives in clay or enriched soils. It's very drought tolerant once established. It grows to about 1 to 2 feet tall and wide. Wild petunia looks good planted at the front of a border or naturalized in a meadow, weaving among other plants. It attracts bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies, and is a larval host for the common buckeye butterfly. Seed generation is low, so it's best to propagate wild petunia by stem cuttings taken in June or July. Hold the rooted cuttings in a cold frame until spring. The leaves are hairy, making it unpalatable to deer and rabbits. Wild petunia, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the blooms on my abelia shrubs. The black-eyed Susans and coneflowers are putting on their summer show. Over at the community garden plot, baby eggplants and squash are forming. In garden tips that we shared this week, we talked all about gardening supports, including that large flowering dahlias need to be staked in order to stop the bloom stalks from breaking. There are a number of good ways to do this. The Dahlia Society recommends simply tying the plant at several points along one tall support or using a tomato cage. In local gardening events, if you're in the greater Washington, D.C. area, please join us for our garden photo show opening reception on Sunday, August 2nd from 2 to 3:30 p.m. at Meadowlark Botanic Gardens in Vienna, Virginia. We'll be showing our 2026 garden photo contest winners and having some light refreshments. And the DC State Fair contests are now open. Register at dcstatefair.org Contest registrations will close on Friday, August 21st, and winners will be announced at the fair on Sunday, September 6th. So join us that day at the fair, Sunday, September 6th, but you will want to register in advance for the flower arranging contest, which takes place live at the fair, and I will be one of the judges at that. Spaces are very limited, so sign up today. And then the Ancestral Knowledge School is hosting a wild, edible, and useful plant and mushroom walk on Saturday, August 22nd from 9 a.m. to noon in Lanham, Maryland. Learn to identify and build relationships with plants, and this will cover botany basics, foraging for food and fun, traditional ethnobotanical knowledge, intro to herbalism, and much more. Again, you can find out more about that at ancestralknowledge.org.
This is The Last Word by Christy Page with Food Gardening Network on When to Pick Bell Peppers by Noran Olson. Bell peppers don't get the press they deserve. These fruits, yes, they are technically fruits, are one of the most commonly grown crops in the world, and they come in a wide array of colors and rich sweet tastes. Those green bell peppers you get at the supermarket, well, give them a few more weeks on the vine and they'll develop colors ranging from bright red, glowing orange, delicate white, smooth chocolate, soft lilac, and more. That's when to pick bell peppers if you want those sweet, delicious flavors. Bell peppers are pretty for sure, but they also have more health benefits than most people realize. For example, did you know that green bell peppers have twice as much vitamin C as oranges? Red and yellow bell peppers have 4 times as much. Bell peppers are packed with vitamins, especially vitamin C, minerals, and disease-fighting compounds. Rich in antioxidants, bell peppers can protect your heart, lower your blood pressure, and help control blood sugar. And they're wonderfully versatile in the kitchen. Enjoy them raw in salads or with homemade hummus. Roast them as part of a tray bake, or go with a classic like stuffed bell peppers. A bell pepper makes the perfect container for whatever hearty and delicious filling you want to add. There is, however, a catch. Bell peppers are the most common variety of pepper. As it turns out, they're also among the fussiest of the pepper family. Think Goldilocks. The soil and air temperature need to be not too warm nor too cool, but just right. This goes back to their tropical roots, where temperatures tend to fluctuate less than in the more temperature regions of North America. Bell pepper seeds take about 10 days to germinate, and some bell pepper varieties can take up to 100 days to develop. So you want to have healthy seedlings ready to transplant as soon as the soil is warm enough to nurture them. That means a lot of gardeners with dreams of colorful bell peppers will need to start their seeds indoors a good 6 to 8 weeks before the expected last frost. And they'll need a nice warm spot. That ray of sunshine your cat likes to sleep in won't do the trick. Bell pepper needs soil at about 800 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate. When you move them outdoors, give them ample time to harden off. Once they're in the ground, the use of plastic mulch and drip irrigation can help increase your yield. Plastic mulch helps keep the soil warm the way peppers like it. It's important to keep the plastic away from the plant stems, though, to avoid the stems getting burned or damaged as the plastic heats up. Bell peppers like a full day of sun, preferably at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. They also like well-drained soil that's rich in organic matter. Sandy loam soil is best. If you can give your peppers that, along with temperatures around 7 degrees Fahrenheit, you're off to a great start. They can grow in the ground, in raised beds, and containers. Before you assume your job is done, though, keep reading. Pepper seedlings are delicate. Some gardeners have had success growing bell peppers by surrounding each plant with a 1-gallon milk jug cut open at the bottom and the top. The milk jug approach insulates the plants from temperature drops and acts as a barrier to soil-level pests like cutworms, snails, and slugs. Additionally, though, peppers love the sun. Too much high-temperature sun exposure can lead to sun scald. Installing a floating row cover with hoops can provide some protection from the sun without completely blocking it. I know it sounds like bell peppers are a lot of work. They can be, sure. But here's the thing. Aside from the fact that they taste great, look great, and are loaded with nutritional value, they also make great garden companions for other vegetables. For example, peppers have shallow roots, carrots have deep roots, talks about maximizing some space. The feathery carrot fronds can also act as a living mulch, shading out weeds. And lettuce can help crowd out weeds while it provides you with some fresh salad makings. You've got a ready-made salad right there. And here's another bonus. You can harvest your bell peppers before they're ripe. Those are the green peppers that are so common at the supermarket. Plus, if you harvest some of your peppers when they're green, your plants will keep producing flowers to set more fruit, so pick away. So if you're trying to decide when to pick bell peppers in your garden and aren't sure if they're ready, you can probably just go for it. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by Real Humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC Podcast Episode 167, Flinging with the Garden Tourist, Episode 32, Garden Tours, Europe and Beyond, Episode 146, Spring Color Inspiration at Longwood. You can become a listener supporter by going to the link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. Happy gardening!